The sky over evergreen pines that Monday morning was the flat gray of cheap concrete, the kind that promised nothing but another day of perfectly trimmed lawns and perfectly enforced rules. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the HOA patrol car. Yes, they had their own little golf cart fleet, cruise past my mailbox for the third time this week. My grass was exactly 2.5 inches. My American flag hung at the regulation 45-degree angle. But apparently my welcome mat had inappropriate messaging because it said "Home Sweet Home" in cursive. The latest fine notice was already taped to my door when I stepped outside. $75 for visual clutter. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. Subject line blank. 3 words. No more calls. I stared at the way you stare at a parking ticket you know you're not paying. No greeting, no sorry, just the final white flag from the woman who once cheered my first apartment. Clive Rohr, my stepfather, had finally won the long war of slow erosion. He'd steered her bank accounts, her opinions, her holidays, until she was just an echo wearing his cologne. The last phone call 2 weeks ago had been me laying out the pattern, how he dismissed my career in compliance consulting as cute little spreadsheets, how he'd quietly linked her retirement to his advisory side gigs. Her silence then had said everything. This email made it official. I took a sip of coffee, black and bitter like the taste in my mouth, and opened my contacts. Mom deleted. Clive Rohr deleted. Cousins. Aunt. Anyone who might relay his messages gone. Then the email rule. Anything from their domain straight to a folder I named Archive Family. Out of sight. Out of mind. Out of my life. The house felt quieter than it had in years. Not peaceful. Tactical. Evergreen Pines was supposed to be the American dream with guardrails. Instead, it was a 400 home pressure cooker run by Regina Holt. The HOA president everyone called Karen Regina behind her back. Perfect blonde bob, pastel cardigans, and a smile that could freeze lava. She'd been fining me for 18 months straight. Bird feeder too visible. Christmas lights left up until January 2nd. Once even 4 excessive porch pumpkins after Halloween. Every violation letter came with the same opening line. As your dedicated board, we care deeply about protecting property values. Translation: we care deeply about controlling you. I'd stayed silent, paid fines, smiled at the annual block party while she lectured on community standards. But I'd also started keeping a private log. Every fine, every email, every petty citation, because I knew the bylaws better than she did. I'd read the 187-page covenant document cover to cover during one sleepless night after the Flamingo incident. Knowledge was the only weapon they couldn't find me for. That afternoon, I walked to the community center for the quarterly budget review, open to residents. Though nobody ever came except me. Regina sat at the head table in her signature pearls, flanked by her usual yes-men. And beside her, wearing a navy blazer that looked like it had been borrowed from a funeral director, was Clive Rohr. My blood turned to ice mid-step. He didn't look at me. He was too busy shaking hands and laughing that practiced baritone laugh I used to hear at Thanksgiving while he explained why my opinions were adorable but naive. Regina beamed. Everyone, please welcome our new compliance consultant, Clive Rohr of Rohr Advisory Services. He's here to help us streamline our vendor relationships and, most excitingly, oversee the new Community Wellness Fund. Your dues will finally work harder for you. The room murmured approval. I stood at the back, invisible, while my mind screamed. This wasn't coincidence. This was invasion. He'd found the one space left in my life and planted his flag right in the middle of it. I slipped out before anyone noticed, heart hammering, and went straight home to my laptop. I opened the HOA public portal. Every association in the state is required to post financials, and started digging. The Community Wellness Fund was brand new. Its mission statement read like a Hallmark card, targeted health and educational initiatives for our cherished residents. Listed address, a P.O. Box in Delaware. Famous for lax oversight. Board trustee, Mallory, Regina's executive assistant. I cross-referenced the EIN with public records and found the first red flag. 3 months ago, the fund had disbursed $12,400 in medical assistance grants. The very next week, Evergreen Pines paid Roar Advisory Services exactly $12,400 for internal control consulting. Same amount, same timing. Down to the day, I lean back, a dark laugh bubbling up. The HOA that fined me $75 for a welcome mat was running a money-washing loop with my stepfather. Classic. They'd preach about protecting your investment while skimming it straight into his pocket. That night, I printed the first packet. 10 pages. Flowchart in black and white. Risk score for my own spreadsheet, 0.93. I titled the cover sheet, Vendor Loop Conflict of Interest Query, and slid it into a plain manila envelope. No emotion, just data. The next morning, the community email blasted out. Exciting update. Clive Roar to present Wellness Fund vision at special board meeting. I smiled at the screen. Game on. The special meeting was held in the clubhouse ballroom. Fake chandeliers. Plastic ferns. The faint smell of chlorine from the pool outside. Every resident who bothered to show up sat in folding chairs while Regina presided like a queen on her throne. Clive stood at the podium in a power pose, laser pointer in hand, clicking through slides of smiling children and generic stock photos of wellness. Folks, he boomed, this fund isn't just charity. It's an investment in our shared future. Your monthly dues will finally deliver real value. I sat in the third row, arms crossed, the manila envelope in my lap like a loaded gun. When the Q&A opened, I raised my hand. Regina's smile faltered for half a second. Mara Reed, Unit 142. Quick question for the consultant. Can you explain why the first disbursement from the Wellness Fund went to an unnamed beneficiary and was immediately followed by an identical payment to Roar Advisory Services? The room went still. Clive's laser pointer clicked off. Regina's pearls suddenly looked too tight. Clive recovered with that oily charm. Mara, always one for details. That's a standard pass-through for administrative costs. Perfectly legal. Perfectly transparent. I stood up slowly. Then you won't mind if I read from the bylaws. Section 14.7. Any vendor contract exceeding $10,000 must be reviewed by an independent resident auditor and posted with full deliverables. Have those deliverables been posted? Murmurs rippled. Someone in the back whispered. She's right. Regina banged her gavel like it was a judge's hammer. This is not the time for nitpicking. Mara, we have a full agenda. I didn't sit. I walked to the front, placed the envelope on the table, and spoke loud enough for the back row. Then consider this my formal request for an independent audit under Section 14.7. I've attached the public filings, payment timelines, and a risk analysis showing a 93% probability of structured financial impropriety. Copies are available for anyone who wants one. Clive's face didn't change, but his knuckles went white around the podium. Regina's smile had frozen into something ugly. I turned and walked out to the sound of chairs scraping as a dozen residents suddenly wanted copies. Then my phone stayed silent. No frantic texts from Mom. No family emergency guilt trips. The firewall was holding, but the war had just moved from my inbox to the neighborhood. The next 3 days were a masterclass in HOA gaslighting. Regina's daily emails called me a concerned resident with valid questions while simultaneously scheduling emergency landscaping reviews on my property. My lawn was measured twice. My trash cans were cited for being visible from the street for 11 minutes. Clive, meanwhile, was everywhere, charming retirees at the dog park, promising that the Wellness Fund would finally fix the pickleball courts. I stayed silent. Kept logging. Kept printing. On day 4, the anonymous Slack-like resident forum lit up. Someone posted the flowchart I'd made. Comments exploded. Wait. Our dues are paying his company. I got fined $200 for holiday lights, and they're laundering money. The pressure was building. I could feel it in the way neighbors suddenly waved at me instead of looking away. But the real escalation came at the Friday board meeting. Clive had pushed for a closed session to discuss sensitive vendor matters. I wasn't invited. Residents never were. But the bylaws said any resident could attend if they submitted a written request 24 hours in advance. I had. They'd ignored it. So I showed up anyway. The security guard at the door was one of Regina's nephews. Closed meeting. Ma'am, I held up my printed request. Section 9.2. Open to any owner upon written notice. I have a time-stamped email. You can call the police if you want to explain why you're violating the covenants. He let me in. Inside, the board table looked like a war room. Regina at the head. Clive beside her. Legal counsel on speakerphone. They were mid-sentence when I walked in. Regina's voice cracked. This meeting is closed. Actually, it isn't, I said, taking the last empty chair. And for accuracy and compliance purposes, this meeting is now being recorded. I placed my phone on the table, voice memo already rolling, and quoted the exact bylaw clause that allowed one-party recording during governance discussions. Clive laughed, but it sounded forced. Mara, sweetheart, this is getting ridiculous. We're family. The word landed like a slap. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. I didn't flinch. No, we're not. And right now you're a vendor under review. So let's discuss the P.O. box in Delaware that serves as both the Wellness Fund's official address and the remittance address for Roar Advisory Services. Same P.O. box. Same signature line on the grant forms. Yours. Clive. The legal counsel's voice crackled over the speaker. I'm advising everyone to stop talking. Too late. One board member, a retired accountant, leaned forward. Is this true? I slid copies across the table. Public filings don't lie. Neither do bank timestamps. Regina tried to gavel again, but the sound was weak. Clive's charm had finally cracked. Underneath was pure calculation. He looked at me the way a man looks at a chess piece that just moved itself. The meeting adjourned in chaos. But the seed was planted. By Sunday, the resident forum had 187 comments and a petition for an emergency full audit. My phone buzzed once, Mom. I didn't open it. The filter sent it straight to oblivion. Monday brought the first real victory. The board was forced to call an emergency open meeting. Every chair filled. People stood along the walls. Regina looked like she hadn't slept. Clive sat in the advisor's seat, arms crossed, trying to project calm. I was given 5 minutes to present. I kept it clinical. Flowchart projected on the wall. Payment loop explained in plain numbers. Risk score glowing red. Then the audio clip. Clive's own voice from the closed session. Mara, sweetheart, this is getting ridiculous. We're family. The room gasped. Someone actually booed. Regina tried damage control. These are serious allegations that require proper process. A retired judge in the third row stood up. Madam President, the bylaws require immediate suspension of any vendor under fraud investigation. I move we suspend Roar Advisory Services and freeze the Wellness Fund pending independent audit. Seconded. Carried 7-0. Clive's face went the color of old drywall. He stood, voice low. You're making a mistake. All of you. Especially you. Mara, your mother will hear about this. I met his eyes for the first time in years. She already did. No more calls. Remember? That goes for both of you. The gavel fell. The fund was frozen. Clive's contract voided on the spot. But the real explosion was still coming. That night the email started. First from Regina's personal account, pleading, threatening, promising to make the fines disappear if I dropped it. Then from Mom, A long, rambling message about family opportunities and not being selfish. I screenshot both. Redacted names. Filed them under external pressure evidence. Then I replied to Mom with one line. No more calls means no more leverage. Sent. Deleted the thread forever. The next morning my porch was covered in glitter. Someone anonymous, of course, had dumped a bag of pink glitter all over my welcome mat with a note. Mind your own business. Troublemaker. Classic HOA Karen move. I took photos, added it to the growing file, and laughed the kind of laugh that sounds like breaking glass. Because now I had them on harassment too. The independent auditor arrived 2 days later. A no-nonsense CPA from the State Association. I handed her the full packet. She spent 6 hours in the clubhouse going through every ledger. When she emerged, her face said everything. Embezzlement, she told the board in the next emergency session. Simple, elegant, and stupid. The wellness fund was a pass-through. Every dollar in, minus a small skim for Regina's administrative honorarium, went straight to Roar Advisory. Total siphoned so far, $187,000. And the bylaws make every board member jointly liable. Regina actually clutched her pearls. Clive tried to bluster about misunderstandings. The CPA just slid the report across the table. The State Attorney General has already been notified. Expect subpoenas. The room erupted. Residents demanded refunds. Someone started a GoFundMe for legal fees to sue the board personally. I sat in the back and watched the empire of petty tyranny collapse under the weight of its own greed. But the sweetest moment came when the security company updated the permanent exclusion list. Both Regina Holt and Clive Roar were banned from all common areas. The clubhouse, even the walking paths. Their key fobs were deactivated while they watched. Clive's face when the guard took his visitor badge was the kind of image you frame in your mind forever. The board resigned en masse the next day. New elections were called for the following month. Residents lined up to run, normal people, not power-hungry Karens. My own name was on 3 different nomination petitions. I declined. I'd already won the only title that mattered. The woman who made the HOA fear her. The state investigation moved fast. The fake charity was shut down. The Delaware P.O. box was seized. Federal postal inspectors showed up with warrants. Regina's house went on the market 3 weeks later, for sale to pay restitution. Clive's advisory company lost every client in the metro area after the news hit the local paper. HOA consultant and president accused of 6-figure embezzlement scheme. I framed the article and hung it in my home office. The final board meeting before the new one took over was purely procedural, signing off on the audit findings and issuing refunds. Every resident who'd ever been fined under the old regime got a check. Mine came with a handwritten note from the new treasurer. Thank you for having the guts we didn't. I cashed it and used the money to throw the first block party in years. No rules. No clipboard. No Regina watching like a hawk. Kids ran wild. Adults drank beer from cans. Someone even put out pink flamingos. The HOA police were gone. The neighborhood was finally breathing. But the last loose end arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Clive. You destroyed your mother's future. Everything she had was tied to that fund. You happy now? I saved the recording, attached it to an email to the state investigator with the subject, additional evidence of witness intimidation. Then I blocked the number. Mom's final email came the next day. One question. Why did you escalate? I typed back the only answer that mattered. Because no more calls means no more cover. Sent. Then I edited my filter one last time. Permanent delete. No archive. The channel was gone. The door was welded shut. 3 months later, the new board passed a complete rewrite of the covenants. No more $75 welcome mat fines. No more clipboard patrols. Just reasonable rules enforced by reasonable people. They even named the new community fund after me. Quietly, no ceremony. The Mara Reed Resident Protection Account. Every dollar earmarked for legal defense of any homeowner targeted unfairly. I smiled every time I saw the name on the website. The neighborhood was quieter now, but the good kind of quiet. The kind that comes after a storm when the air finally smells clean. I still took my morning coffee at the window. Still watched the patrol car, now driven by a retired teacher who waved instead of glared. My grass was still 2.5 inches. My flag still at 45 degrees. But nobody measured anymore. One Saturday, I was out front pulling weeds when a new neighbor walked by. Young couple. Just moved in. The wife stopped, looked at my house, then at me. You're her, aren't you? The one who took down the old board. I shrugged, smiling. Just a resident who read the bylaws. She laughed. Well, thank you. We heard the stories. The old president used to fine people for breathing wrong. Still does, I said. Just not here anymore. She gave me a thumbs up and kept walking. I went back to my weeds. The sun warm on my back. The sound of kids laughing down the street. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed, perfectly within regulations. The war was over. The rules had finally been turned on the people who wrote them. And the best part? I never raised my voice once. The revenge wasn't fireworks. It was spreadsheets and bylaws and quiet little clicks of a mouse. Each click closed another door. The day the state attorney general filed charges against Regina and Clive, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the news vans roll in. Neighbors gathered in little clusters, whispering, pointing at the Holt house 2 streets over. Someone had already stuck a for sale, motivated seller sign in the yard. I didn't gloat. I just felt the deep, bone-level satisfaction of a system finally working the way it was supposed to. The same bylaws they'd used to terrorize the neighborhood had become the rope they hanged themselves with. Clive tried one last move. He showed up at my door at dusk, tie loosened, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 10 weeks. Mara, we can still fix this. Your mother's devastated. Just talk to the investigator. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I didn't open the screen door. Section 22.4 of the Covenants. No soliciting on private property without written permission. You're trespassing. Leave or I call security. He laughed, bitter. Security? That's cute. You really think you've won? I don't think. I documented. I held up my phone, already recording. And this conversation is now Exhibit G. He stared at the red dot, mouth opening and closing like a fish. Then he turned and walked away without another word. I watched him until he disappeared around the corner. The last shadow of the old regime slinking off into the twilight. The following weekend, the new board held its first official meeting. I attended as a guest of honor, front row. The president, a quiet accountant named Paul, called the session to order and immediately passed a resolution. All past fines issued under the prior administration are hereby vacated and refunded with interest. Cheers erupted. People hugged. One elderly lady who'd been fined for having too many garden gnomes actually cried. Then Paul looked straight at me. And finally, we'd like to recognize the resident whose diligence and courage made all of this possible. Mara Reed, would you please stand? I did. The entire room rose with me. Applause thundered. Not the polite golf clap kind, the real kind that shakes the rafters. Someone started chanting, Mara, Mara, and the whole room picked it up. I felt my face heat, but not from embarrassment. From the pure, ridiculous joy of watching an entire neighborhood finally breathe free. After the meeting, Paul pulled me aside. We also updated the exclusion list. Regina and Clive are permanently banned from all HOA property, including the sidewalks. Their photos are at every gate. I laughed, the first real laugh in months. You know, I used to hate the idea of an exclusion list. Now it feels like justice. He grinned. Turns out the rules are only as bad as the people enforcing them. The last piece fell into place a month later. The court ordered full restitution. Every homeowner received a check. Mine was sizable, enough to pay off the last of my student loans and still have some left for a new welcome mat. This one said "No more calls" in bold letters. I placed it front and center on my porch where the HOA patrol car, now just a friendly golf cart, passed every morning. The driver, the retired teacher, slowed down and gave me a salute. "Looking good, Mara." "Feeling good," I called back. That evening I sat on the porch with the mat under my feet, watching the sunset paint the houses gold. My phone stayed silent. No unknown numbers. No guilt trip emails. The archive folder was empty because I deleted the rule entirely. Nothing from the past could reach me anymore. A soft breeze carried the sound of neighbors laughing 2 houses down. Someone was grilling. Someone else was teaching their kid to ride a bike without training wheels. Normal life. The kind the old regime had tried to strangle with rules and fear. I raised my glass to the empty street. "No more calls," I whispered. "And no more Karen." The words tasted like victory, sweet, final, and completely earned. The room was small. A quiet glass box on the second floor of the new clubhouse reserved for private reflection. Late afternoon sun slanted through the window, turning dust motes into tiny golden stars. I sat alone at the circular table. Laptop open. One audio file loaded. 14 seconds long. I put on headphones, not because I needed them, but because this was ritual. I pressed play. Clive's voice filled my ears. Smooth and conspiratorial from that long-ago closed session. "Mara, sweetheart, this is getting ridiculous. We're family." I listened once, twice, 3 times. Each time the words lost more power, dissolving into meaningless noise. The man who had once controlled my mother's life, my neighborhood, my peace of mind was now just a ghost in a digital file. My finger moved to the trackpad. I dragged the file to the trash. Then I emptied it. Gone. The phone on the table vibrated. Unknown caller. I didn't even look. My thumb found the red icon out of pure muscle memory. The call ended before it began. No hesitation. No debate. Just the clean, satisfying click of a boundary that would never be crossed again. I stood and walked to the window. Below, the neighborhood stretched out in perfect order, but the good kind. Lawns were still mowed. Flags still hung at 45 degrees. But nobody was measuring with a ruler anymore. Kids played in the street. Neighbors waved without suspicion. The HOA patrol cart rolled by with a friendly beep instead of a citation. I picked up the dry erase marker from the tray on the wall. In clean block letters I wrote across the whiteboard, "No more calls is a policy." I stepped back and smiled. The words weren't my mother's anymore. They were mine, forged in bylaws, sharpened by data, and sealed with the quiet satisfaction of a war finally won. I capped the marker, closed my laptop, and switched off the light. The golden twilight wrapped around me as I stepped into the hallway. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind me with a soft pneumatic hiss. In a profound silence of the empty clubhouse, there was only one sound left, the definitive click of the lock engaging. Nothing more to say. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I read every single one. If this HOA Karen takedown gave you the justice you needed today, smash that like button, subscribe for more neighborhood revenge stories, and hit the bell so you never miss when the next entitled board gets exactly what they deserve. Your support lets me keep telling these stories. See you in the next one.